You ever find yourself reading self-help books only to realize after the fact, you know what, they didn't actually help that much? Or maybe taking personal development courses, but then after the fact realizing, hey, I don't know if I actually developed a whole lot after that. If so, join the club. I think a lot of us have been there. And as I was thinking about this question, I think there's really one key mistake that we make when it comes to trying to make improvements to our psychology and our emotional health and our personal growth more generally. Hi, my name is Nick Wignall. I'm a clinical psychologist and the founder of The Friendly Mind, a free weekly newsletter where I share practical, evidence-based advice for emotional health and resilience. And in today's video, I'm going to explain the crucial distinction between emotional intelligence and emotional fitness, and why your emotional health and resilience overall probably depends on getting much clearer about those two things. A reader asks, you often frame your writing as being about emotional health, but you also write about emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, emotional maturity, etc. What's a simple way to understand the difference between all these terms? Emotional health is a broad umbrella concept that refers to how healthy or not our emotional lives are. On its own, not super useful. I tend to just use it as kind of a container concept for a couple of other much more important and helpful terms. Three core elements of emotional health. In my experience, there are three ideas that make up the core of what it means to be emotionally healthy. Number one is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means understanding how your emotions work and how to work with them in a healthy and effective way. Emotional fitness is a commitment to a set of behaviors, habits, and exercises that support and strengthen your emotional health. Emotional resilience is your ability or capacity to respond to difficult emotions in a healthy and productive way. Now, these three ideas, they actually relate to each other in a really particular fashion and can be represented by a simple equation. Emotional intelligence times emotional fitness equals emotional resilience. Here's the basic logic. Most of emotional health basically boils down to emotional resilience, to your capacity to respond well, especially to those difficult emotions like anxiety, anger, shame, grief, stuff like that. But how do you become more emotionally resilient? How do you develop the capacity to respond to those difficult emotions, sometimes those really overwhelming, painful, difficult emotions, in a really helpful, healthy, and effective way? Well, I think there are basically two ingredients. Emotional intelligence, that's what you know or understand, and emotional fitness, which is what you do on a regular basis. Now, if you think about it, in any area of life, ability is a function of both understanding and practice or behavior. So, for example, to play the piano well, you do need to understand some things about piano, like what the notes mean and how to hold your hands and posture and all that kind of stuff, right? But you could spend, decades and read hundreds and hundreds of books on piano theory and how to play the piano. But if you just did that, would you get any better at playing the piano? Probably not. To get good at playing the piano, yes, you need some theory and understanding, but you also need a whole lot of practice. So theory on its own is usually necessary, but not sufficient for growth in any area or skill. And I think this is just as true for emotional resilience as a skill. If we want to cultivate our emotional resilience, it requires a combination of understanding, which is emotional intelligence, and practice, which is emotional fitness. So back to the initial question of this video, why don't people make more progress on their personal growth and emotional health goals? Well, speaking for myself and a lot of the people I work with, I think it's because our overall attitude towards emotional health and personal growth tends to be biased toward the emotional intelligence side, toward understanding and concepts and ideas and all that kind of stuff. But if you think about it, if you really want to get better at managing your anxiety or your anger in a healthy and productive way, it's not just understanding. You need practice. You need fitness. You need behaviors that align with this goal you have of improving your emotional resilience. Now, I'm not going to get into more depth on all those concepts now in this video, but if you want, I have more in-depth guides on emotional resilience, emotional intelligence, and emotional fitness on all three of those. So I will put links in the description if you're interested in one or more of those and want to go deeper on them. Now, I said those three were kind of the big three when it comes to emotional health: emotional intelligence, emotional fitness, and emotional resilience. And I really believe that. But there are a lot of other related terms that you hear thrown around in the world of emotional health. So I want to briefly go through some of those other terms to differentiate them from what we just talked about. I think that'll be pretty helpful. All right, so this is a brief and definitely not comprehensive list of other related concepts in emotional health. Emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is a person's tendency to prioritize long-term goals and values rather than short-term gratification in the presence of difficult emotion. In other words, when faced with a difficult emotion, does the person act kind of like a child? Are they impulsive and sort of selfish in their reactions to difficult emotions? Or do they act more like an adult? Are they reflective and considerate? Mental health. Now, mental health refers to the clinical side of emotional health. For example, emotional health is concerned with anxiety. Mental health is concerned with anxiety disorders. Emotional endurance. Emotional endurance is the capacity to be with a difficult emotion rather than avoiding it or trying to get rid of it. It's essentially the practical side of emotional tolerance. Emotional tolerance is the idea that you can be with and tolerate a difficult emotion, again, instead of trying to avoid it or get rid of it. And emotional endurance just means your capacity to put that concept into practice in everyday life. Emotional processing. Emotional processing, it usually refers to something kind of like how you think about and work through difficult emotional experiences. But it's almost always really poorly defined and kind of vague. And as a result, I feel like it's not usually very helpful when people talk about it. The friendly mind. So the friendly mind is my own term that describes a relational rather than combative approach to difficult emotions and inner experiences. So instead of viewing difficult emotions and thoughts as enemies that we need to avoid or get rid of, we view emotions as messengers or friends that are trying to tell us something important. And whether that message is true or false, or whether it's something that feels good or feels bad, it's not trying to hurt us. Our emotions always have our best intentions at heart. Emotional literacy. Emotional literacy means having a large, diverse, and fairly nuanced vocabulary with which to describe and think through our emotions. Emotional fluency. Emotional fluency is the ability to relatively quickly and easily identify, differentiate, and express what we're feeling emotionally. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to learn more from me about emotional health and related concepts, I have a couple resources for you. Mood Mastery is the first one. This is my 4-week live emotional resilience masterclass. Basically, 2 times a year for a month at a time, I take a handful of students, usually about 40 max people per cohort, and we spend 4 weeks going through my entire system for emotional resilience, how to build emotional resilience, specific practices, exercise, tools, techniques, the whole thing. So if you're interested in something like that, you can check out moodmastery.com. I will also include a link in the description below. The second thing I want to share with you is another video I did called 3 Ways to Stop Bad Moods. And the basic idea for this video is that bad moods are inevitable, but a lot of times our bad moods are much more intense and much longer lasting than they need to be because of the way we respond to them. And if you get better at responding to your initial bad mood, turns out it can be a lot less intense and impactful in your life. So I kind of unpack 3 ways to do that specifically in that video, which you can check out right here.